She loved him. She trusted him. She vowed to spend forever by his side. But in return, he gave her a death sentence. A devoted wife, faithful to her marriage, is blindsided by a diagnosis that should have been impossible. How did she contract HIV when she had only ever been with her husband? The answer was more than just infidelity. It was a betrayal so deep, so unforgivable. But what he didn't know was that she wasn't the type of woman to sit back and let her life be destroyed. She was about to do something no one could have ever predicted. What she did next was beyond anyone's imagination. Was it justice or something far worse? Welcome to Shocking True Crime Stories, where the most chilling, real-life crimes come to light. Every case we cover is based on true events, some terrifying, some unbelievable, but all shocking. If you have a passion for uncovering the darkest mysteries of the criminal world, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, and let's dive into the depths of true crime together. Meet Linda and Michael Thompson, a seemingly perfect couple residing in the peaceful town of Brooksville, a quiet town where everyone knew everyone. Married for over a decade, they were the epitome of marital bliss. From the outside, Linda and Michael Thompson had the kind of marriage people admired. Neighbours often saw them together, Michael in his crisp business suits, Linda in her neatly pressed scrubs. They looked like the perfect couple, the kind that had it all. They had built a life that many envied. Michael was a corporate executive at a prestigious firm, climbing the ranks with ease. He was respected, well-spoken, and always carried himself with confidence. Linda, on the other hand, was the heart of the household. A dedicated nurse, she spent her days caring for others, always putting her patients first. She had a gentle way about her, a warmth that made people feel safe. Together, they were the image of stability, of love, of everything a marriage should be. But perfection is often just a mirage. Behind the carefully curated smiles and the polished exterior, something was off. Linda had noticed it months ago. It started small. Michael working late more often than usual, unanswered texts, his phone screen tilting away when she entered the room. He was distracted, distant. At first, she chalked it up to work stress. She knew his job was demanding, and she didn't want to be the kind of wife who questioned every little thing. But then, there were the unexplained business trips. Michael had always travelled for work, but lately the frequency had increased, and there was something different about the way he acted when he returned. Edgy, restless. Linda tried to push her doubts aside, but suspicion crept in like a shadow, lingering just out of reach. Then came the changes in their intimacy. Michael, once affectionate and attentive, became withdrawn. His excuses piled up. Tired, overworked, not feeling well. Linda told herself that all marriages went through phases, that the spark sometimes dimmed before reigniting. But deep down, an unsettling thought took root. What if I'm losing him? She never imagined that she had already lost more than just his attention. She had lost something far greater, something she could never get back. The man she had trusted with her heart was keeping a secret so dark, so devastating, that it would destroy everything she thought she knew about him. And by the time she uncovered the truth, it would be far too late. Michael Thompson had spent years crafting the perfect life, a thriving career, a beautiful home, a loving wife. On the surface, he had it all, but behind closed doors, he was living a lie. For months, maybe longer, he had been walking a dangerous tightrope, balancing between the life he had built with Linda and the secret he shared with his boss, Robert Hayes. What started as innocent conversations in the office, late-night strategy meetings, whispered jokes in hallways, slowly turned into something else, something neither of them had planned for. Robert was powerful, charming and persuasive. He had a way of making Michael feel seen in a way he never had before. At first, Michael resisted, telling himself it was nothing more than admiration, but admiration blurred into something deeper, something forbidden. The stolen glances turned into lingering touches. The late meetings became private dinners, and before Michael could stop it, he had crossed a line he could never undo. The affair was a secret buried beneath corporate suits and professional handshakes, hidden in out-of-town conferences and unexplained absences. Michael told himself it was temporary, that he was still in control. He convinced himself that no one would ever find out. But lies have a way of unravelling. Guilt crept in like an unwelcome guest, lingering in the quiet moments. When Linda kissed him goodbye in the morning, when she curled up beside him at night, he felt it gnawing at the edges of his conscience. He would tell himself, "I'll end it tomorrow." But tomorrow always came and went. Robert, on the other hand, wasn't ready to let go. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and Michael was no exception. The longer the affair continued, the harder it became to walk away. And soon, it wasn't just Michael's conscience weighing on him, it was the fear of what would happen if the truth ever came out. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. What Michael didn't know was that his choices had already set off a chain reaction, one that would shatter lives, expose hidden truths, and lead to consequences far worse than he ever imagined. And the person most affected, the one person who had no idea any of this was happening, Linda, the wife who had trusted him, the woman who had vowed to stand by his side in sickness and in health, the woman he had unknowingly condemned. It started as exhaustion, nothing out of the ordinary. Linda Thompson worked long shifts as a nurse, often on her feet for hours at a time. Fatigue was part of the job. But this felt different. She woke up tired, even after a full night's sleep. Small tasks left her winded. Headaches came and went, lingering longer than usual. Then came the fevers, low grade at first, then sharp spikes that left her drenched in sweat. She blamed stress, thinking maybe she just needed a break. Then the bruises appeared, dark patches on her arms and legs, like she had bumped into furniture she couldn't remember. When she nicked herself in the kitchen, the bleeding took longer to stop. She brushed it off. She was a nurse. She had seen worse. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Her co-workers noticed too. "You should get checked out, Linda," one of them had said. "It's probably nothing, but better safe than sorry." So she did. She walked into the doctor's office expecting to hear she was anemic or maybe suffering from a vitamin deficiency. She never expected what came next. The doctor sat across from her, flipping through her file, his expression unreadable. "Linda," he said gently, "your blood work came back with some concerns. We ran further tests." A pause. "We need to talk about your HIV results." Linda blinked, confused. HIV? That wasn't possible. She forced out a laugh, shaking her head. That can't be right," she said, gripping the arms of the chair. "I'm married. I've only ever been with my husband." The doctor didn't flinch. He had heard this before. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I understand this is a shock, but the results are clear." The air in the room felt thinner, like it had been sucked out. Her skin grew cold, her heartbeat drumming in her ears. HIV, HIV. The word bounced around in her head, but it didn't make sense. It didn't fit into her life, into her reality. And then a horrifying thought took hold, a thought so terrifying she almost couldn't say it out loud. Michael. She clung to the last thread of denial. There must be a mistake. Maybe the lab mixed up the results. Maybe there's another explanation. But there wasn't. By the time she left the doctor's office, a numbness had settled over her. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly at the world outside. Somewhere, deep in her gut, she already knew the truth. The only question left was, why? Why would Michael do this to her, and what was he hiding? Linda sat in silence, staring at the test results still clenched in her trembling hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of the truth itself had sunk into it. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the betrayal she was about to confront. Michael would have an explanation. He had to. There had to be another reason, another answer. Because if there wasn't, then the man she had built her life with had not only betrayed her, but sentenced her to something irreversible. She didn't remember the drive home. Her body moved on autopilot, her mind consumed by questions that had no answers, yet. But she would get them. Tonight. When she pushed open the front door, the house was eerily quiet. Michael was home. His car was in the driveway, but the usual sounds of the television or his typing on his laptop were absent. Linda dropped her purse on the counter and walked toward the living room, where she found him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up at her, smiling at first, but the second he saw her face, his expression shifted. "Linda," he asked cautiously, sitting up straighter. "What's wrong?" She held up the test results, her grip so tight that the paper crinkled in her fist. "This," she said, her voice shaking, "this is what's wrong." Michael's eyes flicked to the paper, but he didn't reach for it. A long silence stretched between them, so thick it felt suffocating. "Say something," Linda demanded. "Tell me how this happened. Tell me how I have HIV when I have only ever been with you." Michael swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Linda, Don't lie to me." She cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. "Not now. I want the truth." His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he was going to try to deny it. But then his shoulders slumped, and a look of resignation washed over his face. "I've been having an affair," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda felt her stomach drop, but she forced herself to stay standing. She already knew that part. Deep down, she had suspected for months. What she didn't know, what made her blood turn ice cold, was who. With who? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Michael hesitated, rubbing a hand over his face. "Robert," he finally said. "Robert Hayes." The name hit her like a freight train. Robert, his boss. A man she had met, shaken hands with, exchanged polite smiles with at company events. Her breath caught in her throat. The room spun. The betrayal was layered, deeper than she ever could have imagined. It wasn't just another woman. It wasn't some faceless stranger. It was him. The weight of the revelation crushed her, but another thought pushed through the haze. "Did you know?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. Michael's brows furrowed. "What?" "Did you know that you were putting me at risk?" Michael's eyes darted away for a fraction of a second, just long enough for her to catch it. Her stomach twisted. He had known. Maybe not at first, maybe not for sure, but at some point, a sliver of doubt had entered his mind, and he had chosen to ignore it, chosen to risk her life in the process. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You did this to me," she whispered. "You." Michael reached for her, but she stepped back, recoiling from his touch. Outside, The world continued as if nothing had happened. But inside their home, their marriage, their entire lives had just been reduced to nothing but lies, deceit, and irreversible damage. And while Linda stood there, heartbroken and betrayed, the rest of Brooksville was about to learn the truth. Whispers would spread. Questions would rise. Had Robert known his status before the affair began? Had Michael ignored the risks? Or was there still another secret waiting to be uncovered? Linda Thompson had never seen herself as a vengeful woman. She was a healer by nature, a nurse who dedicated her life to caring for others. But betrayal has a way of reshaping people. And this wasn't just betrayal. This was an attack on her life. The pain of Michael's affair was one thing. The humiliation of discovering it in the most devastating way possible was another. But the moment she realized that her own husband, the man she trusted with her life, had knowingly exposed her to a deadly virus, something inside her changed. She would not let this go unanswered. Linda wasn't just angry, she was determined. Michael had made choices, selfish, reckless choices, and now he would face the consequences. And Robert, the man who had been just as complicit, he wouldn't walk away from this unscathed either. With a steady hand, she signed her name on the lawsuit. She was taking them both to court. The courtroom battle begins. The case sent shockwaves through Brooksville. People whispered in grocery store aisles, in break rooms, at dinner tables. Did you hear about the Thompsons? Can you believe what he did to her? The scandal wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about deception, negligence, and a betrayal so deep it left a permanent scar. The lawsuit accused Michael and Robert of endangerment, negligence, and reckless conduct. Linda's lawyers argued that both men had acted irresponsibly, putting her life at risk without her knowledge. Every sordid detail was dragged into the open. The affair, the hidden truth about Michael's double life, and the devastating consequences Linda was forced to bear. Michael sat in the defendant's chair, his once proud posture slumped under the weight of his own choices. Robert, whose reputation had once been untouchable, now sat beside him, his carefully built career hanging by a thread. The prosecution painted a damning picture, one of deceit, selfishness, and willful ignorance. They presented medical records, messages, evidence of nights spent together in secrecy. But the most powerful moment came when Linda took the stand. She spoke not just as a betrayed wife, but as a victim, someone whose life had been irreversibly altered by the man she trusted most. Her voice was steady, but her words cut deep. "I didn't just lose my marriage," she said, looking directly at Michael. "I lost my future, my health, my peace of mind, and the worst part, you knew. You knew there was a risk, and you let it happen anyway." Michael couldn't look at her. The verdict that changed everything. After weeks of testimony, the jury made their decision. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Michael was found guilty of reckless endangerment, a charge that carried serious consequences. When the sentencing was announced, several years in prison, the weight of it finally seemed to sink in. He was led away in handcuffs, his future no longer in his control. Robert, though not criminally charged, faced a different kind of punishment. His name was tarnished, his career crumbled, investors backed out, business partners distanced themselves, and soon his powerful reputation was nothing but a cautionary tale. Justice had been served, but for Linda, the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in reclaiming her life. She had been betrayed. She had been hurt beyond measure, but she refused to let that define her. As she walked out of the courthouse, past the flashing cameras and murmuring crowds, she knew one thing for certain. She was not a victim. She was a survivor. Linda's story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the far-reaching consequences of deception. One lie, one secret, had set off a chain reaction that destroyed lives. Trust is the foundation of every relationship. It's what allows people to feel safe, to open their hearts without fear. But when that trust is shattered, the damage goes beyond heartbreak. It seeps into every part of life, turning love into fear, security into uncertainty. For Linda, the betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical. It wasn't just the pain of discovering an affair. It was the knowledge that the man she had vowed to stand beside had made choices that endangered her very existence. Michael's actions didn't just cost him his marriage, they cost him his freedom, his reputation, his future. And Robert, a man who had once commanded power and influence, now found himself reduced to whispers and scandal. But the real tragedy, it didn't have to happen. If honesty had prevailed from the start, if difficult conversations had been had before reckless decisions were made, lives could have been spared from this destruction. This story is more than just a shocking scandal. It's a warning that secrets never stay hidden, that lies have a way of unraveling, that the choices made in the shadows can have devastating consequences in the light of day. So the question remains, how well do you really know the person lying next to you at night? And if faced with temptation, would they choose honesty or risk everything? What are your thoughts on Linda's response to her husband's betrayal? Do you believe justice was served? Share your opinions in the comments below. If this story captivated you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping true crime stories. And stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for watching.